All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Penn State Turf Chat, or Turf Chat, not Turf Chat, Happy Hour. I'm on the wrong module here. I'm John Kaminsky. I'm a professor at Penn State, run the two-year program. Joined here with Dr. McGraw and Dr. Lanscoot and our guest, Tyler Bloom. I think that we'd start by letting the faculty introduce themselves, and then I'll introduce Tyler, and then we'll let him kind of take the lead. Ben, why don't you start?
Thanks, John. I'm Dr. Ben McGraw. I'm the turfgrass entomologist at Penn State, and I'm just happy to be here. Happy to see Pete Lanscoot. He looks great. Looks like he just woke up.
I think he's aging backwards, like Benjamin Button.
I know, Benjamin Button, totally.
Yeah,
and I'm also glad to see that John Kaminsky is not afraid to wear a headband in multiple Zoom meetings.
I think I'm going to start a trend. I have to admit, like I did this in one of our shows early on, and Lane Treadway messaged me and he's like, "Where'd you get that?" And I'm like, "I got a bunch of extra. Do you want one?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I sent him one. He's starting to wear them. Trendsetter. This is like.
I want to do rag too.
All right.
I'm Pete Lanscoot.
Right,
I'm a turf professor in the Penn State Turfgrass program. I do mostly extension, some research, and teach a case studies course, which I'm involved in now on the World Campus.
How's that going?
Good. I got 46 students for a writing intensive course. I'm going to be busy, and they're going to be busy. So far, so good.
Awesome. All right, so our guest tonight that's going to be kind of sharing some information is Tyler Bloom. He's a graduate of the program in 2009, was a superintendent for several years, and during that time in the Baltimore area, initiated I guess it's Tyler, you call it a job training type situation where he worked with high schools and some of the labor department and got grants to encourage people to get into, I think, not only the green industry, but also like all aspects of the club. In this time where we're dealing with a labor shortage and a labor crunch where we can't find enough qualified people, Tyler kind of took the lead in terms of trying to recruit some people younger to get them interested in the program. And so he's going to talk to us today about his current efforts in recruitment and, how to mentor these young people. So Tyler, I'm going to turn it over to you and go mute. Before you say anything, I'll tell anybody in the participants, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A or the chat. I'll be monitoring that and I'll chime in and kind of break in and ask Tyler those questions along the way. All right, Tyler, it's all you.
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. As I said to Dr. Kaminsky, I'm actually in Cleveland, Ohio at a Panera Bread, so I apologize for the elevator music in the background. But like you said, I was a golf course superintendent for 6 years. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I've recently relocated back to Pennsylvania in sort of this pursuit of a totally different career venture and, really helping superintendents and golf clubs deal with this issue of labor and how do we recruit people, how do we develop them, build better teams, teamwork. So I'm going to give you some insights of things that I've seen over the last 3 months that I think work really, really well. We're not going to hit on every single aspect of recruiting. I'll tell a little bit about my story as well. And hopefully you come away with this thinking that of talent strategy is something that, doesn't just start in March when you're ready for the season to kick back. It's really a 12-month program that I think a lot of superintendents have to really evaluate now, especially in COVID. So I'm going to switch over to my screen right now. So we kind of had this perfect storm, with COVID, and really we had pre-existing challenges with labor as a whole. The industry is, for the last number of years has been, I guess that the words complaining is probably wrong, but definitely stressed with labor, whether it's filling assistant positions, whether it's the entry-level role, keeping people inspired that it's more than just a job and a paycheck. And then you throw this whole dynamic with COVID-19 this year. There's complications with people that have H-2B or other international labor resources, restrictions, budget cuts, people making career changes, the whole unemployment benefits. So I've really heard that conversation the last couple months of people aren't coming back to work, they're milking the system. there's still work to be done, but people aren't coming back, government aid, and then also family issues. People are dealing with their kids going back to school. So like I said, it was sort of like a perfect storm. But, I really want to start off by giving this slide for people to really think about talent acquisition, that there's two sides of the coin. There's what employers want in their people, and we're not talking necessarily about having a 4-year or 2-year degree employee. This is just your basic entry-level person coming through the door and what employers really want. And then also on the other side of the coin is what do employees want? And I think when those two things are equal, it's a great situation. When something on any of these pillars is sort of missing, that's when, situations, people are leaving jobs, and these are some of the reasons why. It's pretty consistent across the board from what I hear from superintendents, what they're looking for in employees. And then on the flip side, why people are leaving jobs and jumping into new areas. So I think it's just a snapshot of that. And if any of those pillars on, like I said, like employees, if your compensation isn't what I would call industry average or your local market average, they're going to be looking for 50 cents an hour more. They're going to be looking for $1 more an hour. If they don't align towards the job and the job's just not a right fit, they're going to be looking for different, opportunities. One of the things that I really try to coach businesses on right now is establishing some sort of a developmental system. So growth opportunities. How can we take someone that's an entry-level employee and scale them up to maybe an irrigation tech or equipment manager? Maybe it's equipment operation. So how can we scale that individual up? And there's systems and approaches that, we can implement. That's just the basic thing of recognition. It gets lost, but just acknowledging people for the job they do, especially on a year like this when budgets are getting cut, those extra pats on the back go a long way for a lot of people. But I really try to describe, these are the 4, if I go into a workplace and a superintendent or club manager asks me, what do we have to do to become fully staffed? I think these are the 4 key things. You have to have an absolutely killer workplace culture. And I've got some good examples that I'm going to show over this. And, workplace culture to me it's an environment where people can have fun. It's an environment where people feel like they're gaining skills. There's a level of autonomy. They obviously can have a competitive wage, but it's the camaraderie. And there's a lot of really good superintendents, turf managers out there that do this. If you're recruiting and you're trying to, fill the pipeline, you have to communicate what your value proposition is at your facility. And I think when you look at the job boards right now, you go across TurfNet and just look at the assistant ads. A lot of them seem like they're pretty much the same job. There's no differentiation. And I know, Dr. Kaminsky, you probably could attest to this, that a lot of your students now are looking for those extra added benefits. And they're not necessarily always going to the top 100 facility, but going to the facilities where they're getting a total rewards aspect, a very broad scope, and getting different experiences and different forms of compensation. And I think point 3 is recruiting.
I agree. I agree for sure on that point. They're starting to be more particular about what they're hoping to get out of things, and not just going to like a name or a place that's hosting an event or something. And most clubs don't advertise in the way that's attractive to students, even though they might offer those opportunities. So I think your point's pretty spot on.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to take that even to the entry-level employee. So somebody you're offering $11 an hour, but if you can put in there that your company pays for tuition reimbursement, you have flexible scheduling, you have a culture of innovation, like those buzzwords resonate with people of all backgrounds. If you have a very diverse workplace culture of all different backgrounds, those are the kind of terminology that has to get into those job descriptions. So being very pointed and targeted with your job descriptions, I think, is really critical. Don't just go and copy and paste because that's what the top 100 facility, is how they're trying to attract kids or, job seekers. Really think about what you as an employer can provide people and be creative about it. And then I think the other biggest issue, and this was a comment that was made today in Cleveland, is just creating awareness and opportunity, in the turf industry as a whole. Most people don't realize all the different opportunities that are out there, whether it's as a golf course superintendent or a career assistant, sports turf, sales, so there's so many different aspects in this industry as a whole. But I think those 4 key things, if you can take that away from today of what you need to focus on starting right now, I think you'll be in a better position, to recruit. And I use this next slide, to talk about workplace culture. And, it's a little bit of a joke, but in the same way, you have to create an environment where people enjoy coming to see you, your employees, their coworkers, the organization and what it's all about. So anything that you can do, such as, things that I did as a superintendent, every morning I would acknowledge each person by their first name, ask them how their morning is, and talk about things that are going on in their life. And Dean Graves was really good about this. And that's where I really learned it from, was, just acknowledging people. And if somebody looked like they were having a bad start to the morning, as the group would leave the break room, he would go and talk to that person to make sure everything was okay. Those little simple things. It wasn't always about going to employee parties or, we did a lot of functions, whether it was bowling, golfing. You don't have to do that every week, but make it intentional in what you're doing and creating a good workplace culture, providing uniforms, things that you sort of take for granted, but it goes a super long way. You guys see a lot of different properties and facilities. Would you agree on that you're seeing maybe more of a trend that superintendents and business leaders are doing these things now?
I would agree with that, Tyler, for sure. And some pretty big clubs that in the past have not had to worry about recruiting are definitely getting in on that. And I think some of them are even doing it better than clubs that have done that prior to the last couple of years.
I would agree with that. And I would extend that into the sports turf and the landscape industry too. You sort of have to. These are young people that we're dealing with, and they want to feel part of the team.
Yeah, and I think
they want to feel loved.
Yeah, no doubt.
We all want to feel loved.
Well, appreciated is a good term as well. I think this is a conversation that I've had with a couple of GMs lately, that maybe 10 years ago, clubs kind of had themselves on a pedestal thinking, we're XYZ club, we're not going to have any issues. We are, everybody knows us. Well, not really. Like, the job market doesn't know golf exists and don't know turf industry exists. So everything that you do in how you communicate about your company is really critical, starting at that job description. And you are competing against McDonald's, Sheetz, the car wash, the local car wash, your local businesses. So I think having a presence or understanding of what your local community is putting out there in jobs is really important. Oftentimes I would go on Indeed.com and just look at, put in our location and just see what local competitors were doing. And I think that gave us a pretty good, understanding of where we needed to go to be competitive just in the market.
Tyler, how do you think promoting this as a potential career as opposed to a job plays into this? And maybe you're going to talk about it and I'm jumping the gun, but I look at something like Sheetz or McDonald's, and yeah, there's careers there for sure. There's people that move up through that system and there's some good things, but working on a golf course and in this industry, it's like building a career, and how does that play into this?
I think it's so critical in that I would call it an onboarding phase or even your recruiting phase to really demonstrate that. And you can look at your existing workforce and look at people who've been there for 15, 20 years, or you can go on industry websites and be able to promote, and take pictures of other, career opportunities. You have to set a vision for people that they're not just coming there for the season and that's it, and that there's no career progression. It's such a bad message to be sending. Even if you do just need seasonal needs, there's ways that you can craft your message to say, hey, if here's the opportunities here at the club for potential full-time employment, and here are some of the tasks that we need to see you and the proficiencies that we want to see you complete. So critical to communicate that. And, something that I think we did a great job of is when our employees came into the work site, I had a wall of all career industry focused articles. I had on a flat screen TV, a constant flow of videos from either GCSAA or the USGA that I would constantly keep flowing. So people saw that this wasn't just, a general landscaping position. It's career development and it's professionalism. And so I think those kind of small little tweaks in your break room could go a super long way. And so I think those messages and how you craft those job descriptions or your internship flyers, I think they go a long way, personally.
Awesome. Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it helps, from an employer standpoint to have a relationship with, a Penn State, or if you don't have Penn State near you, a community college that has a horticulture landscape program. I think it's really critical to be able to communicate that and connect those dots for people, because you don't know what you don't know. So somebody coming off the street that's just looking for a part-time job might be inspired by knowing that they can move forward and there's different avenues in the career. And it's not just being a golf course superintendent. We talked about it. It could be in marketing. It could be in accounting. There's so many different webs that you could flow a business owner, and that touches people differently. We talked about workplace culture. I'm going to give some good examples of what I've seen in the field and share these. So, the simplest thing of like an employee's utility vehicle, letting them put something that represents them. I've obviously got a Maryland sticker from a recent visit from my former intern. He's down at Baywood Greens, but those little things that they take some personalization into their work and they have some pride. Chris Brown, a Penn State alum, I visited him back in February, and every one of his employee lockers has their name on it and what their role is. Every time that they elevate into a more advanced role, he changes out that nameplate with their new role. So such a small thing goes a long way. He has a chart, and I thought this was super innovative, but he has a chart up in his break room, and it's got a list of all the tasks that one could complete and be proficient in the work site. And then he has the list of the employees' names, and for every, task that they've completed, he puts a check mark or like a star, and they celebrate that. So they have pointed luncheons or, celebrations for every time an employee advances. And those are those small little recognitions that doesn't really cost a whole lot of money. It's not taking somebody from $10 to $15. It's having a one-time, $100 party, if that, pizza party to recognize somebody, advanced in their work craft. I would say that the places that I see that are not having issues with staffing is they've created this sort of internal culture of learning. These two pictures are actually at Sparrows Point, what we try to do. So we had a young staff that didn't have a perception of the game of golf, let alone work. But for most of them, it was their first job. So I would take the staff out to our practice area and just to educate them, let them play golf, let them hit a golf ball out of a bunker. If we were having issues with, for new employees that were learning how to hand mow, let's say they were leaving skips. Well, I'd take them out there and actually have them putt. So they could see the perception from a golfer's viewpoint of what that does. And that sort of educated them on as to why they had to have straight lines, why they had to make sure they had proper overlap and didn't just leave a green, unattended to. I think we did a really, go ahead. Somebody's cutting in.
No, I think it's the background on your end. I think we're hearing people
Gotcha.
yelling at each other in Panera or something.
One of the other things that I tried to do constantly was use our vendors to come in and do product demonstrations, go over equipment, just sort of outside the box ideas, to just educate people on their day-to-day job. I went as far as I had Andrew Green come in and talk about his restoration work at other golf facilities, just to make people aware of, I guess, the complexity of this business and all the different places it can take you. And then those employees got to build relationships. They got to network with professionals in all different areas. And so again, what I see at other facilities is the clubs that are doing that, it goes a long way to sort of creating that internal culture, that they're advancing and they're getting to see different things than just showing up and raking bunkers and on a string trimmer, or mowing fairways. One of the key things that I learned quickly at Sparrows Point was you can't motivate people off of fear. You can't motivate people necessarily just off of a paycheck. And you can't just go and say thank you as like, oh, thank you every day. And it's kind of like, it's not very well intentioned. And there's not a lot of, I guess you could say, authenticity to it. So I do think having some intentional effort towards thanking people for the things that they do goes a long way. We would always do sort of an end of the year, wrap up luncheon, and I'd let the staff pick that, where we would go. So this was at a Dave & Buster's, I think in 2017. But, given the staff ownership and sort of creating that culture as well is so critical. We don't do it enough in delegating and giving people autonomy, to put a little bit of spin, because they're the ones that are going to be, creating the culture just as well as you are. So, when you leave here in this meeting, maybe tomorrow, think about that, just getting a pulse on your staff. What makes them come to work? What excites them? And don't be afraid to ask, what could we do better? And just take their feedback and try to instill that in small bits, and empower them to make those changes. The point 2 was all about value proposition. And I saw this the other day and I had to take a picture because I thought it was very relevant. Chick-fil-A obviously has a lot of financial resources that they can go and offer a lot of different things that maybe clubs can't. But in each individual club, you also have opportunities such as, I'm going to say this and it sounds overused, but pro shop discounts. You know how many people probably will never have access to pro shop apparel, or may not be able to get food at the halfway house? Just accessibility to the golf course, having golfing privileges. Those kind of things go a long way that I don't see that enough. I think that there's flexibility that can be offered in scheduling. If the superintendent really thinks creatively how they can build, their work programs. And that's something that we did. We had a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift. And so I would intentionally try to hire, part-time employees for 3 to 4 hour shifts. And then I would break those schedules up throughout the day. So I always had coverage from 6 to 6. Sometimes employees would mow rough in the afternoon, and I'd have one core employee sort of manage that crew. And yeah, might have only been rough mowing, but to that person that was leading it, wasn't necessarily an assistant. It might have been a little bit more tenured employee, but they were developing leadership, communication skills, and having to coach new employees. Yeah, the other benefit was those new employees got to get advanced to do some, I would say elevated jobs like rough mowing. And again, that's just an example, but keeping flexibility, I think, is really important as well. I love using this slide, like total rewards compensation. Again, I challenge everybody to go home and think about their current club and, this approach of different buckets. Certain people want different things. Not everybody's after a paycheck. Some people want that flexibility. Some people may need time off now to attend to their kids, whether it's for school or just adjusting their schedule. Maybe total rewards are in reimbursement for college tuition. So maybe you can only pay them $11, but you could find a way to give them money towards continuing education. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So really think broad scope of your facility and organization. You have business leaders that might be able to assist you. Oftentimes I would ask members to provide donations towards, like, example, somebody owned a Jimmy John's. He owned 5 Jimmy John's restaurants in Baltimore. I would always tap into him to ask for, $5 gift cards, $10 gift cards that I could just hand out periodically for somebody that's doing a good job. I had a member who owned I don't want to say this, like a appliance business. So oftentimes he was getting rid of refrigerators, ovens, things like that. And I would always ask the staff, hey, does anybody need it? It sounds crazy, but does anybody need a refrigerator? Does anybody need an oven? And those things would go a long way. And oftentimes people would, take us up on that. So again, it's thinking outside the box, but clubs are willing to help if you ask the question. Don't be afraid. To move into a little bit of recruiting. So as we talked about culture and building that, and you're thinking about total rewards, compensation, but also think of what the environment's like. And when you recruit, you should be thinking about things like social media. If you're not using Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, there's such powerful tools to create a story of the personalities in your workplace, the type of jobs that you do, that you could point to somebody. In a job description, again, check out the club's Facebook page here, and they can get an idea of what the work environment's going to be like. They can see that you're actively involved in the community, or involved in the golf industry or sports turf industry. So they do see that it's a career opportunity. It's not just coming in, again, raking bunkers or string trim. It's giving them different opinions and presentation of what the workplace really looks like. I'm going to use some good examples here of people who I think do a great job. John Urbanski down at Wilmington Country Club, usually posts on Twitter different things going on in his work environment. And it's such a great recruiting tool. Hosting people at your facility is a very simple tool to bring them to your site versus, again, posting on a Indeed.com or Craigslist about golf course maintenance. Job seekers don't know what goes on. So if you put in a job description, for instance, that we're hosting a job fair, at our facility, it's going to give people a different perception of what that job really looks like. Chad Mark does this down at Muirfield Village, where they actually hosted a recent GCSAA meeting, a chapter meeting. And again, I know Chad's not intentionally trying to poach employees from other clubs, but it is a way for him, as he's trying to continuing to build an assistant program there, that people might think, oh, Muirfield Village, I've never been there before, but now I've been there and see what's going on. Oftentimes I would send job postings to the local school systems, and I'd say, we're going to have a career fair or a career night. And we would bring students or job seekers, and we'd have hors d'oeuvres set out in the clubhouse. I would bring equipment up for people just to kind of touch, feel, and see. And then I'd have flyers out for Penn State, the turf program. We've used a couple of flyers from you, Dr. Kaminsky, things like that to really resonate about career development and things that they can get involved with. Totally different than just posting a job, online. LinkedIn. I do not see enough clubs or superintendents or sports turf managers using LinkedIn to really try to attract, recruit, develop their people and showcase what their club culture is all about. There's some great examples out there. I think Baltimore Country Club does a great job. And again, you don't need to go out and post every single job that the club has to offer, but I think it's a platform for businesses to advocate and educate about their facility. You can post jobs on your post jobs or pictures of your work environment on your personal LinkedIn account. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think there's maybe a misperception that LinkedIn, that people that join that are just out to seek for new jobs. And I don't think that is it at all. I think people can just tell their story about the things that they're doing and network with people.
Tyler, I have a question about this. Through, I guess, interviews and things that I've been talking to people about, it sounds like people drop LinkedIn all the time, like in terms of saying like, yeah, I use LinkedIn. I'm very, are a lot of people really on there? Like I see some posts coming out, but I never use LinkedIn as a social media platform. I keep my stuff updated maybe every 6 months. But is this something you see as people like actually being more active on and using it?
I see the club managers doing that. I see general managers very actively conversing with each other, pumping each other up. It's their community. And I think sports turf managers, superintendents, and assistants specifically really need to get on this platform because it's underutilized, and it's a great way for them to, again, show the projects that they're involved with, show pictures of their employees who just got Employee of the Month. I think from that aspect, it could be super powerful. GMs are not on Twitter, and GMs are mostly not on Facebook. They are on LinkedIn. So I think it would make sense to me if I was trying to pursue a career and move up the ladder, that I would be posting a lot of my content, with the club's approval, onto LinkedIn. It's sort of like your own personal portfolio, but you're connected to thousands of people. I think right now I have almost 2,000 followers on LinkedIn. And literally that was probably at like 300, 400, 3-4 months ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just, probably because I don't use it as much, that I teach it to my students and I talk to them about developing a presence and at least having their content on there. But I don't get into the comments and discussions on LinkedIn as much as I would on Facebook. But even on Facebook, I don't do much. So I just didn't know of how many people were using it, but it's a strong point you make. So that's good.
I really do think that, I think assistants really should take this, and students should take this to heart, that they can go on there and follow GMs. They can search clubs and learn more about the people that work there and just follow them, just to at least see and observe the conversations that they're having. But I think it's so underutilized, but I don't think it will be in 5 to 10 years. I think LinkedIn's going to have a pretty strong presence in our industry. And I don't know if TikTok will necessarily ever become a viable platform for our industry. I think Instagram is underutilized. Again, a very simple communication tool to promote your business, to promote your, career and job opportunities for your work site. It's totally underutilized right now. GMs and club professionals are not using Twitter. They are using LinkedIn and they're using Instagram. So I think those two platforms people should get really comfortable with and use that to their advantage. Another simple strategy, and I don't have a slide on here, but a lot of organizations don't even have on their website, like their club website, employment opportunities. So, again, such a simple way to make the job application process easier is put an application and employment opportunities up, on your own website, your digital website. Not every club has it. I would say if I viewed 10 clubs, I would say it's close to 50% don't have. It's 50-50. And it's a simple way, to streamline that job search process. Again, just some more examples of, what this could look like. And I'm sure each person here could have a different idea of, for their workplace and what works for them. You don't have to go out and be Teed and Brown. You don't have to be Baltimore Country Club to have an effective, talent strategy, social media usage. Just posting some basic pictures like Andrew Dooley does down at Berkshire Country Club. It's very effective in my opinion, and it resonates with young people, obviously. And it's a great way to build relationships and connect with people. I love this slide because it is, by and large, one of the top conversations I have visit to visit about how are we developing the next assistants. The pipeline's not there. And not every facility is dealing with this issue. Some facilities, I'll give credit to where credit's due. Like Pete Went does a great job in attracting assistants, college educated people. I think John Urbanski does a great job. Those are two names that come to mind. But it seems to be a pretty big global issue that facilities cannot find educated, career-minded individuals. But what's been kind of surprising to me then is the fact that a lot of assistants don't even have degrees. I guess, again, you don't know what you don't know, but I've been really surprised to go to a lot of facilities that their assistants don't even have 2- and 4-year degrees. So how do we help them? Like, how do we build that, outside of just trying to get bodies in the room? And I'm going to use some before and after photos and show you some examples of the things that I did at Sparrows Point that I think made me successful at a club that didn't have all the resources in the world. This is, and I apologize, the picture on the left's blurry, but it's a great before and after photo of Adam, who was our first assistant. Adam was your typical teenager at 17, 18 years old when he started with me. He was a gentleman that had no career direction. I'll be honest with you, his work ethic was substandard. Those employability skills that are really critical, Adam really did not have a lot of that. He was your typical millennial that most people stereotype. And I'll never forget the one time Adam came to me and said, like, when do I get my pay increase? And I sort of looked at him, I'm like, well, what have you done to earn it? And, Adam kind of said to me, well, what do I have to do to earn that pay increase? So we kind of developed a basic program for him, some basic employability skills. And I know a lot of superintendents don't recognize this or aren't spending enough time, but employability skills, to me, those, showing up on time, communicating, it takes hard work because a person like Adam had no mentorship as a youth. He didn't have a father figure to really show him work ethic and teamwork. Adam wasn't a part of sports teams, so some of these young people really do need mentorship at such an elementary level. And it's a lot of time, that I put into it, but it paid off. Adam was then that student that once he started doing the basic things and he got that pay increase, then it was, how do I get to the next level? And so we mapped out a plan for him. He is now, I believe, in the advanced certificate program with Penn State Online. And Adam is a kid who's he's very passionate at what he does. He's a great contributor. Is Adam ever going to be a golf course superintendent at a top 100 facility? Probably not, but he enjoys the work that he does. He does a great job, takes great pride, but it all really started with giving him a vision and spending time with him, recognizing that I had my own flaws too as a manager in trying to lead. So we built that workplace culture together. But the way we developed him, really came through this model. And again, this is something that I think we created at Sparrows Point that now I'm trying to replicate, is this idea of apprenticeship program. And so this model really is a look at what I think our industry is facing with the system challenges. There's not enough kids going to universities, and so the pipeline's really small. And my approach at Sparrows Point was I couldn't recruit somebody that was expecting $40,000 to $50,000 just as an assistant. It just wasn't going to happen. So I had to build the pipeline internally. And so this idea of apprenticeship is that they get that continued education and on-the-job training, once they leave high school versus going to college, maybe doing some internships. And I definitely want to make sure internships have a key role. What you do at the 2-year and 4-year program is so important. This is just an alternative method where maybe some superintendents can't get assistant job or assistants, applying for their job. They have to build that talent pipeline internally. And so with apprenticeships, you can actually get on-the-job funding from the Department of Labor. And I'm going to go on record and saying I believe it's all 50 states. I haven't found one yet that doesn't have this sort of apprenticeship model that a club could sponsor a percentage or a portion of a student's continued education, whether that be through a 2-year or 4-year program. It could be something as simple as an irrigation training course, you know, whatever it is that you need in your work facility. And so that's what I did at Sparrows Point. We built our assistant program through this apprenticeship model. And here's a good slide. You know, in each state, you can get anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 per apprentice per year. It's a federally approved program for training. Now, most people think apprenticeships as, you know, carpenters, electricians, sort of these trade type fields, but that's really what our industry is. And irregardless if you're in food and beverage or you're on the grounds, this apprenticeship model fits all sectors of our business. So it's a really, really structured on-the-job training platform. You can use apprenticeship models for recruiting new employees. You can use it for an existing employee. You can use it to recruit military people. And again, it's just a structurized program. And I'll give you some examples of some of the people who have gone through it, so people get an understanding that when they think of Tyler Bloom, and most people look at what I did at Sparrows Point as just focusing on high school kids, but this apprenticeship program was offered throughout our entire department for somebody who was career oriented and for somebody who wanted to get a pay increase and advance their skills. We had a structurized program for them to complete. We partnered with our local community college. I also had apprentices do an online program through the University of Georgia. You know, obviously Penn State with Adam was a great program. It really fits with whatever the club could afford to sort of start out with. You know, again, diversity. We talk about that constantly now in our industry about how do we get more women? How do we get African-American, different ethnic groups? How do we get them involved? Apprenticeships are a great way to attract people from all different backgrounds. There's a statistic the Department of Labor states that for every dollar you invest in apprentices and on-the-job training, related instruction, this sort of model, you're going to get $1.50 in return on productivity, retention. It's setting a vision for people. And again, I'm sure you don't want to see this, but, and I think that 2-year and 4-year program can be adopted into apprenticeship program. There's no reason that a student couldn't pursue Penn State if they, you know, felt that was the right career avenue for them. But for somebody who can't afford to go to a 2-year or 4-year college off the bat, maybe they join into an apprenticeship program, and over time they develop that interest and the skill set to further their education. They're going to need that education to be a superintendent. An apprenticeship program is not going to lead somebody to becoming a superintendent. That's not going to happen. So that's where the 2-year and 4-year program still fits in really well for those specific individuals that need that level of training. So it just gives you a little bit of an appetite for the different sort of, I guess you could say, recruiting and development options that are out there. And that's what I'm coaching a lot of businesses on, is how to replicate that. So in my 6 years at Sparrows Point, we hired 50 students through this apprenticeship model with Baltimore County Public Schools, and 15 of them are now in the turf industry. We had a turnover rate of about 50% when I started, and within 2 years we were down to 10%. So, and it's not just on, as I alluded to so many times, it took all of these things integrated together. We had a great workplace culture. We had development opportunities for people. We made it fun. We made sure to try to find the right people. So over time, after all these recruiting channels started working for us and we had the workplace culture, it became almost like a self-feeding referral system. So the students themselves were telling their friends, or, you know, our core employees were telling their friends that, hey, you know, things are different here. You might want to check out, you know, a job opportunity here. To the point that from 2017 to when I left, I hadn't posted a job position for any level of position within our department. I didn't have to, because we had enough people coming in from the school systems. Our relationship with the Department of Labor really went into more of a community program. So I had recruiters working for the Department of Labor in our local county, actually feeding me other, job candidates. So that's the value of having, these sort of, if you call them developmental systems, the apprenticeship program. It's really important to have that to show people a vision. So, and I know I definitely want to leave some time for Q&A. I know we didn't cover everything, but I think the biggest take-home message really is, your talent strategy has to be a 12-month program. You have to internalize all these different strategies amongst your existing team. Delegate going to job fairs to your assistants. Have your assistants develop an apprenticeship program with you. It's a great way for them as they're trying to climb the ladder to become a superintendent, that they can walk into a job search or an interview at a club or sports turf organization and be able to hand them a template of how they're going to recruit and develop people using an apprenticeship program model or some other form of structured training. You have to develop that sort of internal culture all the way down to your frontline managers, your regular staff employees, and incentivize it. Figure out ways, having a referral system, where if somebody refers a good employee and they stay on for 30, 60, 90 days, that person gets a bonus for referring them. It makes sense to me. It doesn't really cost a whole lot of money to do things like that. So again, these are just some of the trends that I've seen. It's not all inclusive. Workforce development doesn't stop. It's constantly evolving. So the things you do today are going to be different in 5 years based off the job market. And with that, I'm going to try to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, I think I wonder how daunting it is for people to think about. Like, I looked at the picture of your guy in the bunker and everybody watching. Like, for a club to say, wait, you mean I have to take 12 employees and stand them around and have this type of event for a half hour to make them feel empowered or welcomed? Like, I see the benefit and totally see the benefit. But I wonder how many clubs would be like, that's 12 employees times 30 minutes. That's 60, what is it? 60 times 6, 360 hours. If my math is right, that you just
great question.
had to do to build that environment. And I see the value of it long term, but sometimes they see employees that are like, it's a high school kid. They're not going to be around here longer than anything. They don't really care. Like, how did you convince yourself to dedicate the time to do that?
I did it during lunch break. So I didn't take anything away from productivity, and it never took away from the club's finances. It would never get perceived by that way. And I didn't do it necessarily every day. Maybe once a month we went and we didn't do it every week. It might be once a month, something at that level, right? But at lunchtime, I would typically come in there and I'd break bread with the guys or women in the staff. And I'd have conversations and leave it open for them to talk to me like as a human person versus their boss, right? So if I showed videos, let's just say they had a US Open highlight, and I wanted to show that to the staff and there was something that was of value, I would do it at lunchtime. So it never took away from productivity. Now, it was very disciplined to do that, but it never, I understand where you're coming from. People might think that, so I was kind of thinking creatively.
I didn't even think along those lines of doing it during off hours or during lunch. So that's a good way to look at it that I didn't take into consideration. So we have a comment or a question from Cameron. He says he's seen a high turnover rate at the course that he worked for, and their union. So there's a.
Sorry, I missed that.
Sorry,
Say it again.
my Siri thought that I was talking to it. He said that there's a union, so there's definitely a pecking order for jobs. How do you recommend developing workers under union limitations? Which is probably a whole other can of worms, but that's the question.
Right. So they obviously are in structured jobs that equate to a pay scale. How do you improve retention? I think it comes back to that workplace culture, trying to make things more fun for them. Maybe it's a broader scale conversation with whoever their HR manager is, looking at that turnover. Like, I think that's also a big issue right now is superintendents aren't having those discussions with their GMs. Maybe they're afraid. Obviously with COVID, people are worried about their own jobs, let alone somebody that's at the bottom of the pecking order. But I think having those conversations and educating people on, we're having really high turnover. Like, there's an issue here that we need to solve. Like, I can't produce the product or the service that our members or our customers are looking for because I'm having to replace somebody every couple days or every couple weeks. Somewhere that conversation has to happen. I think that's probably a good starting point. Bringing those discussions of that apprenticeship model or continued education that's offered for employees, that they meet a certain tier. Let's say they've been there for 5 years and you're going to get these options for compensation. Building something like that into that agreement is probably important. And I'd have to obviously look at further, laws and restrictions specifically on union, but I would think those are at least some 2 good starting points. If you can send me, I didn't put it on there, but I'd love for anybody that has any questions and they don't want to bring it out in front of anybody else, they can email me or, tbloom.golf@gmail.com. You can find me on social media at tbloom_golf.
T Bloom. I'll type it into the chat. Tbloom.
.golf@gmail.com.
tbloom.golf.
Yep. At gmail.com.
I didn't know you could put dots in your Gmail account. I put it in there. tbloom.golf@gmail.com. Any other questions anybody has, or I don't know if the faculty that everybody's kind of like hidden their screen. Pete, maybe you have a question.
No, but I want to compliment you, Tyler, on what you've been doing. It's a lot of things to think about in there, things that I probably should have thought about more in my career when I had employees and was training people, even graduate students. Sometimes you just get so busy during the day, you tend to forget about those kind of things, and you're just trying to make your goal for the, and then that happens week after week after week, and you never do get around to paying a lot of attention to your employees, and they make things run. And
I'll give you this sort of example of what I dealt with. Like, when I was in the midst of that sort of, like, I came into Sparrows Point in a situation that I had people stealing. I had people on drugs, alcohol. I mean, I had an assistant curse me out. It was that. Like,
I've heard all those things from other people too. You're not alone on that.
Right. And I was already integrated into the job. So I really did have 2 options, like quit or solve this problem. And I think that my upbringing, like most people, was a very old school mentality, school of hard knocks. Do your job because that's what you're paid to do. It doesn't matter if it's $10 an hour or $15, $20 an hour. And I had to really analyze what I was promoting there. And it really wasn't team cohesion. It really wasn't individual attention. And each individual person, has different perceptions of what success is for them. And, my background was success is defined by becoming a golf course superintendent. And that's not for everybody. Success for some people is being able to go home at 2:00 and enjoy, their kids or go to their ball game. For some people, they get enjoyment out of literally just coming to work and getting out of whatever chaos they have in their own personal life. And I use this comment all the time, but I personally felt when I needed to make a change, I wanted people to come to Sparrows Point and, feel proud of being there. I wanted people to feel like it was the best part of their day being associated with Sparrows Point. And I think that resonated over 6 years to the point where that's kind of the MO is people had fun when they were coming there. And not everybody was going to come to Sparrows Point to climb the ladder. For some people, it was to be their bridge for 3-4 months. That's okay too.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea of what you're doing is there's a ton of work that goes into it, but like that's how you develop these teams. I guess there are some courses in facilities that could just be super cutthroat and do whatever they want and crush people because they're at a top 10 course or whatever it may be. I don't want to
Like a
avoid any top
hazing,
10 courses.
right? You're hazing.
Yeah, like maybe it's a hazing, and there's something to get
How much
away
you
with
could
it.
take.
But to be honest with you, like when I started out in my career at UConn, not that I'm not a dick now, but I was such an asshole and would like scream at everybody and do all these bad things. And like, I had this conversation with my grad student. We were walking around. What's that?
You fly off the handle on a day-to-day basis.
Oh man, I had a conversation with my grad student the other day. We were walking around and I was like, you know what? Like 15 years ago, if we were doing this and I saw this happening on our plots, I would be screaming at people and like yelling at everybody. And so maybe there's some sort of like maturity, or, you know, you develop you, Tyler, I don't know what you were like when you first started out versus when you realized like you need to like change the culture
Immature.
of the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's just some sort of growth that happens there, but like at this point, I recognize there's still things that stress me out. There's times where I'm like, but is that really going to be a problem later? And then I look at it and I'm like, no, it's annoying, but it really isn't going to make an influence on what we're, you know, trying to accomplish in this particular task. But that's a lot of time to develop and commit to mentoring and training people. And it probably isn't, everybody's not probably cut out for that. I mean, I'm assuming that there's people that just won't be able to do what you're talking about doing, and they'll fail at it. And others, maybe they'll mature and learn to understand the idea of mentoring and training people. I don't know, I'm just philosophizing about it, or pontificating, as Fidanza would do, right? Like, I don't know, but it's a very valiant effort, and what you've done is awesome. I don't think everybody can do it.
Well, that's why they hire me now, to help them do that. No, but you know, I think that you're correct. For me, I made a change because I felt a lot of pain. People change because of the pain, right? And the pain was I wasn't going home early enough to see my wife. I couldn't get the job done that I needed to get done. So something had to change, and that was me. But I don't think somebody doesn't, you know, you don't have to be as intense of what I created there to be successful. But doing some of those strategies can go a long way. You know, it's funny, we didn't even touch on this, but like right now in Pennsylvania, there's about 30 job positions open for seasonal groundskeeping positions. And some of those facilities are hiring multiple people. It's going to be really tough to try to bring 6 to 8 people for 3 to 4 more months. So what's a strategy to try to help, you know, that short-term need? Actually coaching a lot of businesses to develop a relationship with a staffing agency, because those staffing agencies can fill bodies, you know, relatively quickly. And surprisingly enough, I ended up hiring 2 people from a staffing agency that were, you know, showed those basic employability skills. So it's an avenue that I think people should keep, you know, when they go through these mass exoduses of 4 or 5 people, and, you know, it's 90 degrees and they don't got time to be, you know, doing administrative recruiting. So having some sort of a backup option like a staffing agency can be really, really helpful short term.
Well, we don't have any more questions that I see, but people can ask still if they want. But I guess what I would say, you know, you take your time and you came on here and you're building your private company. What are the things that you offer? Give a shameless plug to you for like, what are the things that you offer for companies that might be, or clubs or organizations that might be wanting to do this but don't have the time? Like, what do you do? Like, what is it that you do in that situation?
Yeah, so the apprenticeship program seems to be like that initial plug. People are interested in that because they want to recruit from their local high schools or their local community. They like the idea of developing their team internally and having some sort of, structured training. So I coach them through that process. There are some situations where you have misalignment with your management team, and it could be assistants that aren't aligned to the superintendent's vision. And so I kind of come in as an unbiased, objective person to give those insights. So performance development strategies, and, really customize it to what they need. One client specifically has kind of been like that all-inclusive package where we built the apprenticeship program. We've done some leadership training with their assistants. And now I'm doing resume building and portfolio building and online social presence for them, just to coach them up on how to do that. And again, it doesn't have to be very intensive. It can be what I call almost like a wellness check. Just somebody to come in periodically to have conversations about professional development, team cohesion. I've done recruiting. Somebody's hired, a couple clients have hired me to literally, they have multiple positions available. They don't have time because they're low staffed and they're out now changing cups, mowing greens, and hand watering. So they call me to basically do that administrative work. And what's been fun, like every situation I've been in has been majorly different. What one club needs 5 miles down the road, it could be different from the club I'm at, at that time. Like here today, I had 4 different visits in Cleveland, and they were all different situations. Sometimes superintendents just need me to be an educator, an outside voice to be able to help them communicate that message to the GMs and the clubs as to, when your most tenured employee is making $12.50 an hour and you're trying to recruit people, that's probably going to be a challenge. There's only so much that I can do to help from recruiting. So maybe it's more of an education aspect, and I'm giving them data to help back their conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think about the value of people's time, and that is to me, it's so about my time is the most valuable thing. So if I'm a club GM or even a superintendent, anything that I don't have to take away and learn a whole new process, but I could hire somebody to do it, that seems to me like a no-brainer, right? This is the direction we want to go. There's a group that offers that service. Let's, figure out a way to make that happen. So we've been on about an hour now. I think we started a little late, and I don't see a lot of questions, so I don't want to take it on too long. But and Ben and Pete had to leave because we're supposed to end at 7 and they were running. But I guess I would say I'll give you the final parting thoughts in terms of, if you had to summarize anything in terms of your message or where people can find you. I'll give that to you, and then I'll wrap it up and we'll be done.
Well, first, I think thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. We didn't cover every aspect of it, but I think it gave some people some insights and some maybe things to think about when they leave here. Talent management is very difficult. It's a very tough market in any business. You have to have a strategy and a plan. You can't ad hoc your way to being fully staffed. And I'm going to use an analogy of, it's like managing grass, right? You want to try to keep it consistent across the year and try to eliminate those ups and downs. But the only way you can really do that is if you invest the time. You'll get that time back. You'll get that time back because you're going to have people that are more productive. You're going to have people that want to be there, and you're not going to be chasing your tail. It's always the worst points. It's like airification comes or club championship and so-and-so misses work. It's the time that you spend on building those relationships with people, from recruiting and in developing people internally, that really are going to help you out. So, I really encourage people to think a little bit differently on how they treat their people and how they develop their people. And, hopefully today inspired some, at least one person to try to make change.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing, what you've been doing, especially the last, few months during the COVID time. I know we've been in discussions with you about how to make things happen at the university level for several months. And it's a very complicated process, but I think what you're doing is admirable and needed. So I think that's awesome. But with that, I will wrap up the Turf Happy Hour. And I don't know what our next one will be. We'll figure it out, but it'll probably be about 2 weeks from now. But I just want to thank everybody that stuck through this and asked questions and committed to being here and a part of it. And if you have any suggestions for what we should do in the future happy hours, let us know. But thanks again, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And hope everybody has a great fall here, and we'll see you soon.